Today we will be conducting a dissection on a female rat. We will be dissecting and locating the organs within the digestive system to analyze both the structure and function of each organ in relation to each other. The first portion of the video will go into detail on how to dissect the rat, while the second will cover the function. Start by setting up all the necessary equipment that you need as listed above. Next, cut open the plastic seal containing the preserved rat with Mayo scissors and place the rat on the dissection pan. Empty the excess preservative fluid into the jars for preserving organs. Moving on, make sure to pin the limbs of the rat down to ensure that it stays in place. To do this, the rat's bones must be broken as such in the video so that they don't curl back up. Keep in mind, when breaking the bones of the rat's limbs, the bones in its hind legs will be more difficult to snap due to them containing longer, denser, and larger bones. Once the rat is pinned down by the limbs and the tail is removed, it should look something like this. Before we jump into cutting the rat open, let's observe some of its features. The rat has black and white fur which appears to be stained yellow and is about 20 centimeters tall and 10 centimeters wide. Additionally, we can identify the sex of the rat to be female since there are visible nipples on its lower abdomen. Let's now begin to dissect our rat. Starting from the inferior side of the rat, use the forceps to carefully lift the epidermis layer of the skin. Once a small stretch in the layer of skin is made, use Mayo scissors to cut a small incision in this top layer of skin. Be careful not to cut the dermis layer of skin underneath the epidermis layer just yet. Once the incision is made, carefully cut the epidermis layer all the way up to the lower jaw of the rat. Now use the scalpel to completely detach the epidermis layer from the dermis layer to create lateral flaps that then should be pinned to the dissection tray to create a clear opening of the rat. This is also the point that preservative fluid inside the rat will most likely start to show up in small amounts. Make sure this task is handled diligently and with steady hand to avoid accidentally poking through the dermis layer and potentially damaging the organs inside. The dermis layer of the rat is fully exposed, meaning that we can move on to cutting the layer to reveal the organs. Similar to the epidermis layer, starting from the inferior end of the rat, use the forceps to pinch the skin and pull. That way an incision can be made. For this incision, we use the scalpel. However, the Mayo scissors work fine too. Once a small incision is made, use the dissecting scissors to cut the dermis layer all the way up to the lower jaw. Take note that as you approach the superior end of the rat's ribs, which are hard to cut through, might slow down the cutting process. Underneath the ribs lies the heart, the lung, and the esophagus of the rat. With the rat's internal organs now fully exposed, immediately some of the main organs of the digestive system are visible, such as the liver and the intestines. The rat's kidneys, ribs, and connective tissue holding it in place are also visible. However, they are not part of the digestive tract. Since the stomach and pancreas of the rat lie underneath the liver, we will remove it so that we can get a better view of the organs underneath. To detach the liver, we cut the connective tissue that binds it to the posterior side of the rat along with its connection to the diaphragm superior to the liver and the stomach inferior to the liver. This part takes time due to the fact that it might be hard to cut the connective tissue without cutting the liver. In our case, we did have to end up cutting a small portion of the posterior inferior region since we had poor visibility towards the back of the organ due to the preservative fluid. Once all the attachments to the liver were cut, it became really easy to go in with our hands and slowly pull out the liver. Just as a reminder, be careful not to detach the liver flaps while cutting it out. Due to the liver no longer blocking the way, the rat's stomach is now very clearly into view. The stomach is inferior to the esophagus, which it connects to, and superior to the intestines, which it also connects to. We will now begin to remove the stomach to preserve it. Using the scalpel, start by cutting the posterior side of the stomach from the connective tissue and use scissors to disconnect it from the large intestine. The anterior side of the stomach in our dissection detached from the esophagus prior when we were cutting the liver. However, if it is still attached, be sure to use the Mayo scissors to detach it. Then the stomach should pull right out. Similar to the other digestive organs, the intestines were also bound to the anterior side of the rat's body by connective tissue. Since the shape of the intestines were rather irregular, the process of carefully cutting them out of the rat's body took longer. Additionally, now the kidneys appear more visible as we cut out the intestines since they lie in the same region. Looking at the intestines close up, it's noticeable that the outer, slightly darker layer of intestines are the rat's large intestines, while the slightly pinkier ones towards the center are the small intestines. You can also observe one of the rat's kidneys now even more close up. As we cut the kidneys off from the intestines, we notice a greenish-brown, liquidy kind of substance secreted from both the kidney and the intestine. Now that we have dissected all the necessary organs that we need and preserved them, follow the procedures for cleaning up properly. Make sure to properly dispose of the specimen and disinfect all utensils used for the dissection thoroughly and place them back in a neatly manner. Now that we've gone over how to locate digestive organs within a specimen, let's review their function starting with the oral cavity. In humans, these glands are in the oral cavity instead of below like in the rat. The bolus of food now will be swallowed. Next, the bolus travels down the esophagus. When dissecting the rat, we didn't see the esophagus because it is not very easily visible since the trachea is superior to the esophagus. The esophagus transports the bolus into the stomach. Along with the movement, the enzymes in the stomach break down some of the macromolecules in the bolus. The next step of the digestive system is the small intestine. In humans, the large and small intestines are easier to point out than they are in the rat due to rats having the presence of a mesentery in their abdominal cavity. The liver, the largest organ, is an accessory organ for the digestive system. In humans, the liver has 2 clearly visible lobes, while in rats there are 4 visible lobes. Rats don't have a gallbladder, but in humans there would be a gallbladder for storing the bile. The pancreas is also an accessory organ for the digestive system. The pancreas in the rat is less globular than the one in humans. Last but not least, the large intestine separates nutrients and waste. Feces are released through the rectum and out of the body through the anus, which are both part of the large intestine.